They laughed when Amelia limped into the hospital, her face bruised, clutching her unborn child. No one knew her story, only the whispers that followed her through the sterile halls. The rich man's wife who ran away. Her husband, Victor, once adored her, once promised her the world. But power had a way of rotting love from the inside out. He was no longer the man she married. He was a man consumed by control, by rage, by the twisted satisfaction of breaking what he once swore to protect. "You're useless," he had hissed before the whip cracked across her back, the pain searing deeper than the wound itself. It wasn't just her body that broke that night, it was her faith in love. She fled before dawn, barefoot and trembling, with nothing but the will to protect the small life growing inside her. The world outside was cruel, but not as cruel as the one she had escaped. She wandered for days, hiding in bus stations and shelters, whispering promises to the child in her womb. "You'll never know what it's like to be unloved," she murmured through tears. When she finally reached the small-town hospital, exhaustion consumed her. The nurses whispered, some pitied her, others judged her. But Amelia didn't care. All she wanted was to keep her baby safe. She had a secret, a hidden inheritance left by her late mother. It wasn't much compared to Victor's empire, but it was enough to start over. Enough to build something that could heal, even if she never fully could. Months later, behind a new name and a fragile smile, Amelia began again. She rented a small apartment above a bakery, her nights spent feeding her newborn daughter, Grace, and her days planning something that would give meaning to her pain. Slowly, she turned her grief into purpose. She began reaching out to women who had stories like hers, women trapped in silence, afraid to leave, afraid to live. She listened, she comforted, and she helped them find their voices. With the inheritance money, she opened a small shelter. The sign outside read the Grace House. It wasn't grand, but it was safe. Every nail hammered, every wall painted, felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. The shelter became a place of laughter and tears, of healing and hope. Sometimes, when the nights were long, Amelia would sit by the window holding baby Grace and whisper, "You'll grow up in love, not fear." Her heart still bled from the scars of the past, but her spirit blazed brighter than ever. People began to notice her quiet strength, her kindness, her resilience. She wasn't the broken woman they once saw limping through hospital halls. She was a survivor, a protector, a mother who refused to let pain define her. Years passed and the Grace House grew. Donors began to help, volunteers joined, and soon Amelia's small idea became a movement. She trained counselors, provided education for single mothers, and built a network that reached women across the country. Her story became an inspiration, though she never revealed her past. In the eyes of the world, she was just Amelia Grace, the founder, the fighter, the woman who turned suffering into strength. But deep down, she still carried the memory of Victor's cruelty, the echo of that night, the scars that never fully faded. Meanwhile, Victor's empire began to crumble. The arrogance that once made him powerful became his downfall. His partners turned against him, his wealth slipped away, and soon he was left with debts, lawsuits, and loneliness. The same power he worshipped abandoned him. He saw Amelia's face one night on television, her speech at a charity gala, radiant, confident, surrounded by women who called her their savior. The banner behind her read, "The Grace Foundation." His breath caught. He had destroyed her once, yet here she was, stronger than he could ever be. He tried to ignore the ache in his chest, but it grew heavier each day. Guilt gnawed at him, regret poisoned his thoughts. He began visiting the old church where they had once prayed together, whispering prayers for forgiveness that felt too late. When he heard about another charity gala hosted by Amelia's foundation, he made a choice. He sold what little he had left and bought a ticket to the event, unsure if he even deserved to see her. The night of the gala was filled with light, music, and laughter. Victor stood at the edge of the hall, a shadow among glittering faces. At the podium stood Amelia, graceful and serene, her daughter beside her, a young girl with his eyes and her smile. Tonight, we honor the courage of women who believed they were powerless, Amelia said, her voice steady but full of emotion. But I stand here as proof that no pain, no betrayal, no darkness can define us. We rise, not because we are unbroken, but because we are brave enough to heal. The room erupted in applause, but Victor's knees trembled. He felt the weight of every cruel word, every act of violence, every moment he'd let his power consume him. When the event ended, he approached her slowly. She turned, surprise flickering in her eyes before calm washed over her face. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "I don't deserve forgiveness," he said hoarsely. "I destroyed everything good. I destroyed you." Amelia looked at him, the pain of the past flickering like a ghost between them. But her voice was gentle. "Maybe you don't," she said softly, glancing at their daughter. "But she deserves a father who learns." That night, Victor wept like a man reborn. Not because she took him back, she didn't, but because she showed him what true strength looked like. It wasn't revenge that left him speechless. It was her grace, her ability to turn agony into compassion. Amelia didn't seek to ruin him. She sought to heal herself and others, and in doing so, she became everything he had once tried to take away from her. In the years that followed, Victor became a quiet donor to her cause. He volunteered, helped where he could, and tried to be the father Grace needed. Amelia never forgot what he'd done, but she learned that forgiveness wasn't weakness, it was freedom. The world saw her as the woman who conquered cruelty, but she knew the truth. She hadn't conquered it. She had transformed it. Her revenge was not in his downfall, but in her rise, in every life she helped rebuild, in every woman who walked into the Grace house and found hope again. And sometimes, when the sun rose over the shelter, lighting up the faces of the women she had saved, Amelia would close her eyes and whisper, "This is what love was meant to be." Years later, Victor walked into a grand charity gala, his once mighty empire gone, his arrogance stripped away by the passage of time and regret. The chandeliers glimmered above him like stars mocking his fall from grace, their golden light reflecting off the tears he fought to hide. Once, these events had been his playground, filled with applause, admiration, and the illusion of power. But tonight, he was merely a ghost wandering among the living, a broken man in a room that radiated warmth he no longer deserved. He clutched the invitation in his trembling hand, the name printed in silver letters burning into his mind, Amelia Grace Foundation. He hadn't expected to ever see that name again, yet something deep within him had drawn him here. Perhaps guilt, perhaps hope, or perhaps the desperate need to face the one person whose forgiveness he could never earn. He stood at the edge of the glittering hall, watching the stage where the event was about to begin. The crowd buzzed with admiration for the woman behind the foundation, the one who had changed countless lives. Victor's heart pounded as the lights dimmed, and a familiar voice filled the room. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being part of this night of hope." When Amelia stepped onto the stage, his breath caught. She was radiant, poised, confident, her presence commanding yet calm. Gone was the fragile woman he had once broken. This was someone reborn from pain, sculpted by resilience and love. Beside her stood a young girl, no longer a baby, but a beautiful child with eyes so hauntingly familiar that Victor's chest tightened. His daughter. The one he had never held, never protected, never deserved to call his own. Amelia smiled as she spoke, her voice steady, filled with conviction. "The funds tonight will help women who believed they were powerless, women who were told they were nothing. But I stand here as proof that no one can take your worth from you." Her words echoed through the hall, each syllable striking Victor like a confession. He saw himself reflected in every story of abuse, in every mention of cruelty, in every whispered tale of redemption that followed her speech. But there was no hatred in her voice, no bitterness, only strength. She had turned her suffering into purpose, her tears into transformation. The crowd erupted in applause, rising to their feet as Amelia bowed her head gracefully. To them, she was a symbol of courage. To him, she was the embodiment of everything he had destroyed and everything he wished he could become. When the applause faded, Victor remained frozen in place. He wanted to leave, to disappear into the shadows and never face her again. But something inside him refused to move. His heart, once hardened by pride, now ached with the weight of remorse. Slowly, he made his way forward, step by step, through the crowd that parted in confusion. When Amelia looked up and saw him, her expression didn't change. No gasp of anger, no tears of shock, just calm recognition. For a long moment, time seemed to stop. Their eyes met, and in that silence, everything that had ever been said between them seemed to echo without words. He fell to his knees before her, the once feared billionaire now trembling like a child. "I don't deserve forgiveness," he said, his voice breaking. The room fell silent around them, the music fading, the guests unsure whether to look away or stay. Victor's hands shook as he lowered his head. "I destroyed everything good in my life. I destroyed you." The words came out like shards of glass, cutting him as he spoke. For the first time in years, he wasn't trying to justify, control, or manipulate. He was simply telling the truth. Amelia looked down at him, her expression soft yet unreadable. The woman who had once cried in fear now stood tall, her heart tempered by the fire she had survived. She took a step closer, her daughter's small hand in hers. "Maybe you don't deserve forgiveness," she said quietly, her voice carrying across the silent hall. "But our daughter deserves a father who learns." The words hit him harder than any punishment could have. She wasn't offering him redemption. She was offering him a choice, to be better, to change, not for her, but for the little girl whose eyes held both innocence and truth. Tears spilled freely down Victor's face as he looked at his daughter. She stared at him curiously, not with fear, but with a quiet, cautious hope. In that moment, he saw the reflection of what could have been, a life where love had triumphed over anger, where family meant something more than control. He had spent years chasing power, believing it made him invincible, but here he was, brought to his knees not by wealth, not by rivals, but by the grace of the woman he had once tried to break. Amelia helped him to his feet, not out of affection, but out of compassion. It wasn't a reunion, it was a reckoning. She turned to her daughter and said softly, "Grace, this is your father." The child hesitated, then smiled shyly. Victor's heart cracked open. He didn't reach out to touch her. He simply bowed his head and whispered, "I'm so sorry." In that moment, Amelia saw something change in him, a flicker of humanity returning to the man who had lost it long ago. After that night, Victor didn't expect anything. He didn't ask for a second chance, didn't beg for love. Instead, he began to quietly support Amelia's work. He volunteered, cleaned the shelter floors, repaired doors, delivered food, small acts of service that slowly rebuilt his soul. The world never knew who he was. To the women there, he was just another helper, a man trying to do good. And perhaps that anonymity was his redemption. Amelia never forgot what he had done, but she also never let hatred define her. She had learned that true revenge wasn't about destruction, it was about transformation. Every time she saw a woman smile again, every time she held a child who had escaped pain, she knew she had already won. Her victory wasn't over Victor, it was over the darkness that once ruled her life. Years passed, and though they never lived as a couple again, they became a strange kind of family, bound not by romance, but by the shared promise of giving Grace a future built on love, not fear. Victor learned what it meant to be gentle, to listen, to serve. Amelia taught him without words that redemption wasn't earned through grand gestures, but through humility and consistency. One evening, as the sun set over the Foundation's garden, Victor watched Amelia laughing with Grace. The golden light framed them like a memory he wished he could live forever. He didn't interrupt. He simply stood back, grateful. For once in his life, he didn't want to control anything. He just wanted to protect the peace he had once shattered. And in that quiet moment, as Amelia looked back and met his eyes from across the garden, he understood something profound. Her revenge had never been about punishing him. It was about freeing both of them. Her forgiveness was not weakness, it was strength. Her grace was not softness, it was power. And in her silent compassion, Victor found the only kind of redemption that truly mattered, the kind that teaches a man to live, not for himself, but for love.